Welcome to Peacebuilding Initiatives with José Barzola. Peacebuilding Initiatives are collaborative ways of developing healthy, positive relationships via dialogue, cross-cultural understanding, exploring ways to shift our own perspective to build compassion, empathy within our communities. Thank you for joining us today. On today's episode, we are joined by Dick Mosher, who brings over 5 decades of extraordinary legal and leadership experience across litigation, mediation, and corporate counsel work. Native of Chicago and a lifelong Cubs fan, Dick's journey spans from top-ranked collegiate debater to senior legal roles at major corporations like Ball Aerospace, Maytag, and Hoover. He served as a special assistant U.S. attorney, defended the U.S. Postal Services and EOC claims nationwide, and has mediated and arbitrated complex disputes across the globe, including working with the AAA, ICDR, and Japan Commercial Arbitration Association. He has held key leadership roles with the Association of Corporate Counsel for over 50 years and currently serves as senior advisor to the Vanguard Network, helping C-suite executives lead with clarity. Along the way, he's also been a Chile judge, a classmate of Jerry Springer at Northwestern Law, and a firm believer in no beans in Chile. With his sharp wit and deep insight, Dick offers a unique lens on how to manage risk, resolve conflict, and lead with integrity in the courtroom, boardroom, and beyond. He's also a dear friend, and we've been connected through a local nonprofit here called the Conflict Resolution Alliance, which is a collaborative of various mediators, facilitators, folks interested in the conflict management, resolution, um, peace building, bridge building field. And so it has truly been a joy to get to know him over the years, and so thankful to have him here. Uh, so in today's conversation, we will talk about risk management. Um, so framing the conversation a bit. Thank you so much, Dick, for being here today. It is truly an honor, and I greatly appreciate your time with us today.
Thank you, Jose. A pleasure to be here.
So, Dick, you spent over 5 decades in law, corporate leadership, and mediation. How do you define risk management?
Jose, my views on risk management have frankly changed over the years. Getting out of law school in Chicago, risk management was more about who's legally right and wrong. Then, when you start working for a private law firm, and I worked for the Fujiyama law firm way back in the day in Hawaii in the early 70s, you have to add the element of um, damages. It's not just winning and losing, but it damages and revenue because the law firms are driven by damages and revenue. So risk management definitely involves that. The 800-pound gorilla that nobody wants to talk about that's in the room is that law firms and lawyers are motivated by revenue, by profit. They don't do an opinion survey of your clients to determine whether you get a bonus or get promoted. It's all about bringing in revenue. So law firms have a different view. So my view changed of risk management. Then when I went in-house to a corporation at Ball, Maytag, Hoover, and Electronics, it was also a little bit different. It is about the damages, but it's also about the cost you incur or can incur with outside legal counsel. And the critical part that people don't think that much about is that the company exists to make a product or deliver a service. And so the more you take people out of the litigation and the mediation and the arbitration and get them back to what they're doing, creating a product or delivering a service, I mean, that becomes a risk management matter. You want to get them out of the system of litigation dispute management and back into doing what they're really good at doing. And then in the mediation arbitration, I think I shifted again because, as former Judge Ricky Amano would say, you need to be more empathetic. And I started realizing that there's another risk and another cost, and that is people are strongly affected by disputes, whether it's anger or time or blame, various motivations. And that, frankly, is something you have to understand and manage. So, depending on the context, risk management is in one of those categories. but it's something everybody, including the parties, need to think seriously about. Is it all about the money, or is it about the children, the house, the business? And a lot of times people sort of skip that step, and I think that's a big mistake. And as a mediator, I think you can learn. There's a different view of risk management, but you have to talk about it.
No, thank you. I wonder if you might share, just for folks to understand a little further, recall the first time in your life you really became aware of risk, and not just as a danger, but as a, you know, flipping it around as a decision-making factor. And because I think a lot of folks think of risk management as like exactly, literally what it sounds like, but there's an opportunity there as well.
Yes. It happened pretty early because I was a pretty aggressive litigator working for, the famous Wally Fujiyama. We were in court constantly. And I realized at that point how lives are impacted by disputes. We were representing the then mayor of Maui, and the police chief of Maui, and the city council of Maui. And I realized we were taking so much time away from what they were doing that that should really be the focus of this litigation. And we were headed off in a different direction. And so it was a real enlightenment when you realize that risk management is not just about damages. There are other factors involved. And that would be the fairly early on, the first example that started to open my eyes and broaden my perspectives as to risk management, and also generate some very honest conversations with people about, what's important to you. Is it important to you to resolve this and get on with your life? Or are you still so angry that you haven't thought about that yet? And you see that also in the corporate world. When I was working for Ball and Maytag, you'd start out with a dispute and you'd look at risk a certain way. And then about a year or two into the dispute, the business people will come up to you and say, "You got to get us out of this. We got to get back to work." And again, another light bulb goes on, like, well, maybe I'm not thinking about managing risk the same way. And then they start talking about, this is damaging our reputation. Well, that's another kind of risk I hadn't really thought about, reputational risk. So, things have happened during my career that light bulbs keep going off, even at my age. They're still going off time to time to broaden my horizons and get a different perspective.
Thank you. Now, you've litigated as a private attorney, worked as a special assistant, U.S. attorney, and handled federal EEOC claims. How does risk look different depending on who you're representing?
That's a difficult question to answer because it varies so much.
Mhm.
As an example, when I was a special assistant U.S. attorney, they call them SASAs. When I was a special assistant U.S. attorney, I thought the criminal aspect of a case was most important. But then as you get more involved in the case, you find out that what's happening, and this was an identity theft project where it was being run from a prison, from inside a prison, and they were recruiting young students, getting them hooked on meth and getting them to run an identity theft scam. And it's sort of like, whoa, what's going on here? This isn't really about, the criminal aspect of it. The perpetrators are actually in prison. It's about the lives of not only the identity theft victims, but the young men and women who were involved, recruited, sort of, to participate in this. And it gives you more of a sense of humanity when you see the broader picture and how lives are affected. And the same applies to all of these international disputes and the political chaos and international chaos that we've been seeing lately. I mean, that's always been a case. I grew up with the Vietnam War and people leaving for Canada and the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement. So there's always something chaotic going on. And I think people don't take time to sort of step back and say, what what's this all about and who's affected? And once you start thinking about what the risk is, then you can talk about how to manage it. But if you don't understand the risk, it's hard to manage.
Thank you. Thank you. And you're really just bringing up a lot of context about taking really a holistic approach to every situation. And it's not just where's the money of it all. And I wonder if it's something that just going back to, you talked about empathy and compassion earlier, and I wonder if it's something that as the longer you are in the field, I hope maybe, you can't help but become a little bit more empathetic about the situation. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful.
Yeah, that's sort of an idealistic point of view, but hope is a good word for it. There are people that we both know that never become empathetic,
Right.
and there are others more fortunate, I think, personally more fortunate that eventually understand the bigger picture. And mediation in particular, it's just critical. And to me, it started out as sort of a challenge. It's sort of like learning a new skill set. You know, if you're in litigation, you learn how to win, you learn about the finances and the budget and the fees and how the system works. And but as Wally Fujiyama said to me once, he said, it's really not about the law, and it's not about the facts even. It's about the story. And I've carried that for 50 years. It really is about the story. It's a broader question. And when you're talking to a jury, the question of here's what happened and here's why it happened is much bigger than the law. It's much bigger than the facts. They want to hear the story.
And,
And
and I think a lot of this also speaks to your own like upbringing and what has shaped you in your life before you even got to becoming a lawyer. My understanding is you were, very much around for this 1960s cultural revolution that happened between the civil rights movement in Kent State, Vietnam, military draft, rock and roll, hippie culture. Please fill in the blanks if I'm missing anything. I was not around then, so
you
I would
you
love to
you
learn.
missed drugs in that equation, but that was just a rumor to me.
Got it. Got it. But no, I would just love to learn about what would you th say are some of the maybe certain moments that stand out that you think shape your perspective on how you approach the work that you do?
Right. I think everybody's sort of shaped in their personal life and in their career by, first of all, how they're brought up. There's an environmental factor. We were brought up in sort of a middle class suburban background in the Chicago area. I went to seventh and eighth grade middle school with Hillary Clinton. Who knew? Um, but then all of this other stuff is going around. You start reading and hearing about Vietnam and protests and people shot at Kent State. And I think that now takes it from the environmental aspect of what shapes you and your views to a little more realistic aspect of what's going on in the world, not just in your neighborhood or in your house, but what's going on in the world. And because it was the 60s, all the talk was about the man's doing this, the man's doing that. We got to get after the man. Let's go to the coffee house and have a beer. And what's your sign? Your astrological sign. That's how you meet and talk to people. So it's partly how you grew up, but it's partly what's going on around you at the time things are happening in the world. And today, people are growing up in an environment of artificial intelligence and political aggressiveness. And I'm probably missing another six or seven things, but I think that's a factor as well. And I guess bottom line is, how does that affect you as an individual? I mean, do your views change, or are they still the same as when you were 15 years old? So my views, fortunately, I think have changed.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Um, now, getting back to the law and risk management a little bit, when do you think a lawyer should push forward in litigation, and when should they advise the client to settle?
Um, Great question. I think we need to be asking a large group of lawyers, and you would probably get the answer along the lines of when we win.
Uh,
It'd be very, very late in the game. And yet the Hawaii bar ethics uh, rules state that a lawyer must talk to their client about alternate dispute resolution. Some states it's more strict. In California, for example, a similar ethics requirement requires you to file a report with the judge in the case about what you've done to talk to your client about alternate dispute resolution, arbitration, mediation, counseling, whatever's necessary. So I'm hoping that the practice will change, but I'm also realistic knowing that it's all about the revenue for the law firms. So I mean, the lawyers don't really have a vested interest in talking early to settle a dispute early to mediate. Their interest is bringing in revenue. So I'd like to be more optimistic. I think the answer to your question is you should talk as early as possible to the client to find out what their motivation is, what their concerns are, what their risk tolerance is. It's just that it's not happening. And it's not the individual lawyers. There's some individual lawyers, I think, that understand what I'm talking about. It's the law firm, it's the firm structure that creates the problem, in my view.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Shifting a little to the field of mediation and conflict resolution, um, we both know that mediation often involves parties who see risk very differently. So how do you help people get to the table when trust is so low, stakes are so high?
Well, that's also a good question. I think it starts with listening. And we've heard a lot more recently in the last 10 or 15 years about listening, and then a step further, active listening. And a step further, even from that, is sort of acknowledging what the parties are saying by nodding your head, by responding in a certain way to say, I hear you, I understand. Sometimes even, oh, I'm sorry that happened to you, sort of an apology. So I think it's that dialogue, and the dialogue is more empathetic. It's listening. People really want to talk about what happened, how it affects them, how they may feel angry or offended or hurt in the process. And I think a mediator in particular, arbitrator as well, but a mediator in particular or a facilitator is in a really unique position to be able to have that discussion. I think that's critical, and I think that's where you start. And the sort of ironic thing is you see mediators and arbitrators who are retired judges or retired trial attorneys, and they're still acting like they were a judge or an attorney in terms of how they handle the process. They're still making decisions. They're still looking at the legal side of winning and losing. Um, and so that's why it's a hard corner to turn. I think what we need to have is more discussions like we're having now on a broader basis, and not just with mediators or facilitators or peacemakers who think like you and I do, but with the legal community, with the judges, to introduce an aspect of this. I mean, the Hawaiian process of Ho'oponopono, or just Pono, is much more cognizant of what we're talking about here than the legal system is. And I know our Chief Justice over the years has been trying to find a way to incorporate aspects of Ho'oponopono into the legal system. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's those kind of discussions I think can lead to progress.
No, thank you. I actually recently attended a Aha Ho'oponopono event, a 2-day event at West Oahu, and what I loved about it is, well, there was like 200 or so people in attendance and about almost 100 people joining virtually. But it was really the message of getting across that different methods to utilize some of the skill sets, the transferable skill sets, whether it's in social work and mental health, not necessarily calling it Ho'oponopono, they call it something else out of respect for, the origins, but a lot of the intentionality and the skills are still being utilized and can be successful. And so I look forward to seeing how it evolves in the legal field.
But a similar aspect to this is storytelling.
Yeah.
And Hawaii, of all the places I've lived and worked, they'll talk about storytelling, but I think Hawaii is unique. The island culture is unique, and the value of being able to talk in a story manner, in storytelling manner, I think is extremely beneficial. People not only empathize, but they understand better, they listen, they relate to what's being talked, and then they add their own experiences to the story. um, that to me is very different from the practice of law and very beneficial.
Well, thank you. How do you um how do you handle the risk of failure as a neutral in mediation or arbitration?
Um, I should say not well, uh, but I've been very fortunate, lucky, blessed over the years. I think I've tried 100 cases, little over 100 cases to a judge or a jury. I lost my first one, and it's the only one I've lost. And in mediation, I think I'm running up close to a 90% success rate on appellate mediation, where there's already been a winner or a loser. Um, but personally, I don't handle losing well. Um, I mean, the surprise may be I'm an extreme introvert. Uh, People don't believe that, but I've had psychologists who've done tests to a group of management people confirm that I'm off the scales. And I think part of that has to do with that introverted part of my personality. You go into battle and then you have to recover for sometimes days, not making any decisions and just sort of dwelling on things. So I don't personally handle it well, but I think I force myself, even though it's sort of contrary to being an introvert, I force myself to communicate with the other parties and be honest about what this means, what effect it has. If you can find a bright side to it or an opportunity to it, that's even better. And I found that in business as well. Most people say, "Oh me, oh my!" I mean, the world is coming apart, political problems and wars, and the businesses that succeed look at those as an opportunity. It's not a loss; it's an opportunity. And individuals, I think I try to convey that whether it went for you or against you, and sort of regardless of my personally being upset about it, um, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to move on. It's an opportunity to look at things differently, do things differently. So that's how I handle losses. Sometimes better than my client, but they don't always know because I sort of internalize those feelings.
Shifting your perspective a bit, there's opportunities for growth we share with folks or we have to remind ourselves.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So you worked shifting to business and corporate counsel. You worked in-house at major companies like Ball Aerospace and Maytag. How should legal teams communicate risk to CEOs and boards who are focused on growth?
Well, I had sort of a unique way of doing that, which I I think I figured out more by trial and error. I would talk to the business people, the decision makers, in terms of the effect on the business. For example, I know you feel you're right. I know you feel the other side is wrong. However, if we fight this and win, we will have to make 2,000 more washing machines, and it's going to take 300 hours of your executive's time to win. If we lose, we're going to have to make 3,000 washing machines, and it's going to take twice as much. And then there's an appeal. And when you talk to the business in business terms, not in legal terms, in dollars and cents, you talk to them in getting back to what you're doing. Don't you want to get back to what you're doing? Right. And for example, there's a Midwest, I won't mention the name of the company, but a Midwest lawn equipment manufacturer. And their general counsel told me once in a meeting, he said, we're really concerned about our customers and our reputation as a business. So much so that we will pay double what a claim is worth just to get the customer satisfied and to maintain a good reputation. We don't care about those costs. We want to get back to work making products. We realize by the nature of our products, some people are going to get hurt. But to us, it's all about improving, and it's about our reputation. It's not about how much we're going to spend on outside legal fees. So I think with businesses, you got to turn things around to them and talk in business terms. Talk about reputation. Talk about getting back to what you're doing. Talk about the purpose of the business. I mean, you didn't go to business get your MBA because you wanted to spend half your week talking to lawyers. And so that seems to resonate with business people. And you're sort of talking their language at that point. Now, there's still, I mean, the other thing that happens as a practical matter at the beginning of a case, just like an individual dispute, everybody thinks they're right. There's no way we can lose. They're angry. They want revenge. And then a year later, they're saying, get me out of this. And more than once, I've told the business person, remember that case last year where a year later you said, get me out of this? Okay, I'm not giving you a hard time about it, but that's the way things are because you want to get back to work, doing what you do, providing good product, safe product, services. And so I think you talk differently to a business from that perspective.
Once more, shifting their perspective and where they're, talk money and numbers to them. That's great. Thank you. Um, Shifting into cross-cultural and global risk, you've mediated internationally, including in Japan. What are some risks people overlook when working across cultures or legal systems?
That is a huge challenge. And I frankly didn't expect that. When I was working for Ball Corporation, literally, all the lawyers sat in a conference room, and the general counsel said, "Has anybody traveled outside the U.S.?" And foolishly, I raised my hand and said, "Well, I've been to Canada once on vacation as a kid." And he said, "Okay, you're our new international lawyer." And that led to nearly 40 years of international work. And you quickly realize uh, it's so much more about the culture and about relationships. It's nobody's got a legal system as crazy as ours with the cost and the time delays and the discovery process. So in some ways, you could say it's less intrusive, better, less damaging of a process. But to most people, it's not a matter of legal right and wrong. It's a matter of culture and it's a matter of tradition. And that was a huge shift for me to understand that. Totally different than anything I've seen in the U.S. In any job I've had in the U.S. So that to me is the biggest difference. People handle conflict differently. In Asia, for example, you're just not going to have aggressive confrontational meetings. You're not going to have, I mean, The Japanese criminal system has a 99.8% conviction rate. So you pretty much know what's going to happen from the beginning.
Oh,
Uh, you know, and coming out of law school in the U.S., you're sort of taught to be argumentative and aggressive. So that's the biggest shift to me. You have to approach mediation, dispute resolution in a much different manner, um, and a much more almost an apologetic manner when you're putting on a case, as opposed to an aggressive manner. Like, oh, I'm so sorry that this happened to you, but how would you suggest we resolve this? And you wouldn't hear that from an American lawyer or arbitrator, or maybe even a mediator. Um, so it's quite a different approach and quite a change of perspective again. I do sort of, as you can tell, I sort of enjoy looking back on the 50 years, changing perspectives,
yeah.
because you're continuously learning about people, about cultures, about dispute resolution, and you have to be a little bit of a chameleon to be successful and sort of go with the flow and react. And you can't do that without listening.
So true. That is very, very true. I like to think hopefully we become a little wiser as we get older, as we shift our perspectives.
Well, yeah, that's the hope. Uh,
Yes, going back to the hope. Yes.
I think I sort of start with, well, at least I want to be a lifetime learner.
Yeah,
I want to continuously be learning about people and better ways to do things. That's why even after 50 years of this, I enjoy going to conferences and asking people like Ricky Amano and Mike Town, retired judges, how would you do it?
yeah.
And I may know the answer, but I'm constantly surprised by different ways people resolve disputes. And some of them are extremely good. I never would have thought of them. So
A lot
to
of
me, that's a positive.
a lot of what you speak about, going back to empathy and uh traveling, doing work internationally reminds me of the word humility and how far humility can go. In and I wonder, how does humility help in global and cross-cultural risk management? Are they a little kinder, hopefully?
Right. And the other thing, totally unrelated to dispute resolution, is you have to do your homework. You have to know about local sports teams, local food. I once in China,
Protocol.
yeah, in China, I had read that after seeing Flying Tiger, Hidden Dragon, the movie, that young couples who got engaged would go up to Wangshin Yellow Mountain, the top of the mountain, and put a little lock on this to symbolize the union. And I actually went to the point of convincing two CEOs of major companies to go to Wangshin, to Yellow Mountain, go to the top, and put a little lock in the same location to symbolize the marriage of the two companies.
Oh,
It was really cool. I mean, it took me 2 weeks to recover from the walk up the mountain, but it was, that's part of the experience.
it's wonderful. Um, Shifting a little to strategic and ethical risk, have you ever been in a situation where the legally, quote, safe choice was ethically questionable or vice versa? Or maybe you can't talk about it. You can always plead the fifth.
I did teach professional responsibility or ethics at the University of Hawaii Richardson Law School, and I ran into that question: what can I really talk to these students about? Because some of the things you see and experience are just so shocking. The ethical systems are so different, and my perspective has always been, we've only been around for a little while as a country. Uh, some of these countries have been around for thousands and thousands of years. And I'm not really in a position to say that's ethical because that's the US standard, or that's not ethical because the US, we do it differently. So you have to sort of roll with the punches a little bit. Um, I think the biggest ethical issue that I've run into, and I'll talk just in general terms, has been um, corruption, bribery. There are different names in different countries. In Mexico, they call it mordida, which means little bite. In the Middle East, they'll call it something else. In India, they'll call it something else. But the degree to which people are willing to go to government officials to get something done and pay something for that favor um, was was very surprising. I guess I assumed that people would be more ethical by U.S. standards, and we do have a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that says we must be ethical no matter what country we're in
Yeah,
by U.S.
and
standards.
sometimes it's
Other
like the
countries hate
protocol
that.
within those countries, which is so challenging, right?
Oh yes,
It's
yes, and the
expect.
challenge when you're negotiating or resolving a dispute, the challenge is how do you react to it? At first you're surprised at what's going on, and then your next question that is, okay, what do I do about it? Do I object? Do I say I'm absolutely not going to do that? Do I shut my ears and say, well, you do whatever you want to do? Um, it's and the answer actually varies. Um, you don't want to stick yourself in the middle of it, but sometimes it's hard to ignore, and sometimes there are lines you just can't cross. And I ran into that in Bangkok the first time when I was staying there for a negotiation, and I left my hotel to walk to the bazaar to see what they were selling, and a stranger walked up to me and said something that was so shocking that I didn't know how to respond. It was just like, I mean, I can't go to the police and talk to them about it because culturally, I mean, that's what they do. What he was suggesting, and it was like, wow, it's another lesson learned here. Uh, Fortunately, it never happened again, but um, I'm still at a point where I am surprised by some of the cultural and ethical issues overseas, but not to the point where I can say, as an American, you shouldn't do that. Um, so that's a big challenge and a big surprise to people who haven't done business overseas. And it's not just the countries that you might assume. For example, in Italy, European country, well known, well respected, great food. Um, they typically have 3 or 4 or 5 sets of financial books and records, depending on who's asking. So if it's the tax authorities are asking, they'll give you this set. If it's a joint venture partner, they give you that set. If it's someone,
Wow.
it's like,
Sounds like
wow,
someone's actual job just to create
right.
books.
And so my immediate thought was, which set am I getting? And this happened in China too, where they gave me an org chart and I saw 2 boxes that were unconnected, no solid lines, no wiggly lines, totally unconnected. I finally figured out those were members of the Communist Party, the government, who were on the payroll but really had no responsibility or reporting duties. And it was like, okay, well, what do I do with this? So the fact is, they gave me a new chart without the boxes on it. So, okay, works for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not in a position to say you can't pay them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So going on risk and these questionable, um, what do you see the role of values in risk management? Can an organization really manage risk well without a clear moral compass?
Tough one.
Yeah, because
Until you said without a clear moral compass,
right. And
it was a
the question is
it
like, what is your moral compass, I guess?
right. I mean, personally, I think I have a good moral compass, maybe a little more conservative than some people, despite growing up in the '60s. Um, I think my moral compass is fine. I think that the challenge for a company is they exist to benefit the owners, the shareholders, and so forth. So they're frequently confronted with a situation where if they do A, it benefits the people who they're in existence, I mean, to benefit. But B, it's sort of questionable as to whether to do it or not. As an example, and this happens frequently to a lot of companies. We incur $1 million expense, and the discussion will be, well, should we take that charge in the third quarter or the fourth quarter or the first quarter of next year? And it will affect the return to our shareholders if we can push it to the next quarter. Well, I think the accounting rules are pretty clear. You've got to take it in the quarter it's incurred. And so those kind of quote ethical issues, business issues come up pretty frequently, and the public is not really aware of those discussions. Now, the Securities and Exchange Commission has tried to make things more open, um, but it's pretty hard to do that. Those are pretty internal discussions. So I think you need a personal moral compass. I think companies ought to have a personal moral compass. Um, but there are enough borderline cases where, it gets a little blurred. It may be clearer to me personally, but then you also have to ask, as an employee of the company, uh, is it worth risking my job, moving my family? And so that's when your personal moral compass is challenged in terms of your reaction to what is sort of a borderline call ethically. And it's case by case. It's very difficult. I do know friends from Hawaii who have literally left their company and gone elsewhere and uprooted their family just because their personal moral compass would not allow them to do what the company was planning on doing. And lawyers are ethically bound to leave a company if they're in that situation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You're getting all the secrets out,
I know
Jose.
this is no, thank you. I appreciate your and it's honestly just very insightful, and I'm hoping our listeners are just more questions, if anything. But shifting a little bit to the personal perspective, because we talked about perspectives a bit. Um, I know you shared that you lost your father at a young age, and you've made a lot of bold career moves. Um, how has personal adversity shaped your view of risk?
Significantly. I was 15 when my father died of a heart attack, and back at that time, women were basically not in the workforce. They were homemakers, housemakers, and so it was my mother without a career, without an education, and my sister and myself. And I'm frankly not sure how she got us through those years, but it affected me personally in terms of, okay, I guess even at 15, I've got to get serious here about what I'm doing. Um, I can't really financially help at age 15. A paper route's not going to help the family finances, but I also can't, just screw around and take life and education not seriously, and maybe have a better time than I should have had in the 60s. So it did affect me. And it was a major turnaround in school where I was sort of an average, student and very introverted to all of a sudden being right in the middle of things. And part of that is luck, karma. We all have different paths. And I mean, I was literally in the sophomore year of high school plucked out of a speech class, walked to the principal's office, and scared to death, thinking I was in trouble, even though I've never, I don't speak. I wasn't speaking. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I always showed up, and then it was announced to the principal that I was going to be giving the morning announcements over the PA system for the next 3 years. And then I got recruited by the debate team. Then I got recruited. I even, this is as crazy as it gets. You know, they have a fall festival where they appoint a king and a queen and a court. So they're all football players and cheerleaders except for me, because all the nerds in the school, they heard my voice every single day. So I got voted to the court. And
Congratulations, Your Honor.
yeah, it's funny how the twists and turns, take your career and your life in a different direction. So what started out as extreme adversity with your father passing away and not really understanding what you could do or how you could support the family, to all of these crazy things happening and a very good 50-year career and 55-year marriage. So hard to believe.
Congratulations. That's amazing. Um, so you also talked a little bit in your bio about debate, you know, and debate helped, I think, many ways launch your career. How do you see the skills of a debater, thinking on your feet, seeing both sides, translate into smart risk decisions?
Well, you pretty much answered the question there.
Yeah, just wondering if
Uh,
there's anything
yeah,
else that...
yeah, I know. Well, a lot of people don't realize debaters have to argue both sides of the question. Every round you switch. And so what it does is create this need to understand both sides of the issue. So when you're a litigator, arbitrator, mediator, peacemaker, facilitator, your first instinct now has become, I've got to understand both sides of this. I can't just give an immediate reaction and say, I think this side's right or Jose's wrong. I want to hear the whole story. And so that's the benefit that I got from debate and being able to speak on your feet. When a question comes up or you're being cross-examined, you get that from judges a lot. They want to know why you're objecting or what your argument is, and you don't have time to research it. And now you have to sort of hold back a little bit when you mediate and listen more. But the skills from debate, learning both sides, wanting to know all the issues, extremely valuable.
So, at such a young age, you were, who knew you were on your way to where you are today? Um, Looking back, what would you say was the riskiest decision you've ever made, and what did you learn from it?
The riskiest decision, I think, had to do with when I was working with the Hoover Company. Um, and it wasn't just my decision, it was more of a corporate decision. But there was a terrible marketing fiasco and in Europe, and we had to go over there and straighten it out. And I think the decision was to basically uh, deal with the immediate consequences, the damages, the claims. And the mistake was, in retrospect, the mistake was we didn't pay enough attention to the company's reputation. And it was sort of a group mistake. We were all focusing on what immediately had to be done to solve the problem right in front of us. And we didn't recognize that path would so damage the company's reputation in Europe that we ultimately had to sell the European business. We just didn't see it coming. And by the time we did see it coming, it was too late to do anything about it. So that to me was a huge mistake. They actually talk about this situation in MBA courses as sort of a lesson of what not to do. So I I take credit for being part of what not to do on a global scale.
I'm glad there was a positive side to it. See, opportunities for learning for growth.
That's right. Humility is definitely something to
Yeah.
be learned.
Yes. Um, I wonder what advice you might have for young professionals or lawyers who are afraid to take risks early in their careers?
Um, I think the first bit of advice would be um, to listen more. Um, because if you don't understand what's going on, what the issues are on both sides, if you don't empathize and really listen to people and acknowledge what they're saying, you're going to make a lot of mistakes just from lack of knowledge, lack of empathy. And so that to me is the number one lesson, I think, for younger people getting into the business. And I think the second one uh, is again a shift from law school to lawyer to business to mediation, uh, and that is uh, you have to take risk. You know, you sort of go to schools, particularly law school, and a young lawyer. You're so risk adverse. Um, I had the CEO of Ball Corporation tell me once. He said, as I was probably talking about some kind of risky thing we were doing, or what the potential of risk was. He said, "You know, Mosher, if we don't make any sales, we don't need lawyers." And I thought, hey, he's got a point. So, what you're telling me is business takes a lot of risk, and without risk, they can't grow. They can't, they're not going to they'll be out of business if they don't take risks because there are other people out there taking risks. And if you don't risk, you don't learn. If you don't risk, you don't grow. And it applies to your personal career as well as to businesses. Um, you can't eliminate risk. That's why we've talked about managing risk. Risk is always out there. And if you don't take it, you stand still and sometimes you go in reverse. So you need to think about what risks you're willing to take, and part of that is your moral compass, as you brought up, and what risks are just too much, and what risks you see business people take. I mean, they'll take bet the company risks that I still don't feel comfortable doing, but at least I understand why they're doing it. And personally, in mediation, that's the case as well. Sometimes you have to take a risk just to move on. And there's nothing wrong with that. So those would be my words of wisdom
No, thank
from
you.
people who say many years of experience. I would say more many years of personally making or scene made about every mistake possible.
I will say it is fascinating how sometimes we call it like tools of the trade or different skill sets that we utilize. And sometimes we stumble upon them just because life happens. And I find that many times, going back to the empathy, the compassion, the active listening we talked about, I think sometimes just also we talked about humility, just being honest, just being forthright with your intentionality can go really far because not a lot of people are doing that, sadly.
Well, I should add one thing to this that a friend of mine who's a sort of a life coach in the Dallas area taught me. He said pretty much what you said, but he also said, think about the words. Words are extremely important. And that applies, I think, to a lawyer, a mediator, peacemaker, facilitator. I mean, you're sort of taught to sort of immediately respond, immediately react, and you don't necessarily think about the words you're using. Words are very powerful. Words influence people, they hurt people. Um, and so this may be a third lesson, and that is think about what you're going to say before you say it, and the best way to do it. Sometimes you need to be direct, just as you said. There are other times you need to finesse it a little bit because sometimes if you're too direct, the other side gets angry or stops listening,
Yeah.
and so there are occasions where I've had to sort of hold back and finesse it and not say it quite as directly as I might in a different situation. So I think paying attention to the words you use. That's why I never write an email and just push send. Always give it a few minutes, go back to it. Now you can use artificial intelligence to give you a kinder, gentler version of your email, which I usually reject, but I still do make changes from the first draft. First draft is sort of, you know, stream of conscious. It goes out there, and I always look back and say, I could say that better. And as a mediator, arbitrator, lawyer, you don't always have the luxury of waiting too long. But even if it's just a couple of minutes to think about what you're going to say before responding, listen a little more and at the same time be thinking about the words you're going to use in response. Very powerful.
Yeah, no, definitely. Words matter, and everything from gender neutral language to especially if I find for myself English not being my first language, um, being so I've become I feel like a little extra more conscientious of like I remember what is it, those idioms like people talk about like go break a leg and I'd be like why would someone say that? That sounds horrible. Or you know
That's a good point. Actually, if English is not your first language, that's a real advantage to be able to do what I just suggested.
yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. Just as we wrap up, what would you say in one sentence was the biggest misconception people have about risk?
Um, Biggest misconception people have about risk.
One sentence.
I would say people think that risk can be avoided and not managed.
Oh, the A word. We'll just sweep it under the rug. We'll figure it out later. It'll
That's
go
right.
away.
It's
Yeah,
like, which it's like pushing delete on an email. You think it's gone. It's not gone. It will come back eventually. Somebody has a copy. It's on the server. It's on the backup.
right. Right.
Delete as
Especially
many
in this
of
day
us.
and age.
That's right.
Yeah.
And now you've made a bad email even worse by trying to delete it.
What would you say, what does successful risk taking look like in life, law, and leadership?
Say that once again.
What does successful risk taking look like, whether it's in life or law or leadership? And it
I
could be
mean, to
different.
me, I think success is um, being open, having a core sense of values, and learning. It's not the wins and losses.
Yeah, it's about the
And,
journey, it sounds like.
and I mean, I've got a good record. I could fall back on that, but I don't think that's success. Um, I think it's those three things.
Sounds like it's
What
about
about you? What do you
it
think?
sounds like it's about the experience, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, well, that's true. What do you think success is?
So to me, well, success within risk taking perspective. I always go back to passion. I know folks don't really like hearing about that, but like your gut feeling, what's meaningful in that you're doing. Even if, you attempted something and based on, it did not succeed per se, and let's say the shop has to shut down or something, but you followed your heart and um I know it sounds silly and people are like, well, there's no money to be made in that. And but for me, it's at the end of the day, we have one life to live, and so are we living with intention? Are we, as we look back, are we happy with the choices we made? So going back to it's about the journey. I always reflect upon I have no idea where my life is going, but I have to say that I'm very thankful and privileged for the journey I've had so far and excited to see how it continues to evolve.
That's your core sense of values. That's a part of your core sense of values. Nothing, that's perfect.
Yeah, and I embed it as well within my professional context or yeah, just different layers. Because at the end of the day, like many times you end up spending more time at work than you do at home. So if I can find some joy, some humor in what we're doing, makes life just a little more enjoyable.
Well, just promise to call me before you go to Bangkok or China or the Middle East,
Yeah, most definitely. I don't think
where
that's happening anytime
it
soon.
will test your core values.
Yeah, no, definitely not anytime soon. But yeah, I will be sure to reach out. But thank you, Dick, so much for your time, for joining us, your stories, your insights, your candor. Are not only enlightening, but just a real reminder of the power of leadership, grounded not only in experience, but also in integrity. I'm just so grateful for your time, your wisdom, your kindness, your friendship. And to our listeners, today's conversation, if it gave you something to think about, whether it's how to manage risk, how to lead through conflict, we didn't quite get to talk about the chili recipe. So I don't know if you want to throw in. So,
It's a Texas thing.
oh,
It's Texas red chili, and if your chili has any beans in it, it is disqualified. It may taste terrific, just don't call it chili.
so you have the ground beef, you have the seasoning.
You cannot believe what people put in. They put in ground up armadillo tail.
Do you put other like vegetables in it? Like I'm just thinking texture, like, or is it just meat and
They
sauce?
do. No, no, no. They'll put
Okay.
chocolate. They
Oh.
they don't tell you what all the ingredients are. That's a
But
major,
no
major secret.
beans, no
But
type
no
of beans.
beans.
Oh my goodness. That's like I gotta try some. I mean, it sounds more like a stew at that point, but we won't get into technicality.
Well, what happens is most of the chili, I mean, almost all the chili tastes basically the same with minor differences. Right. But talk to anybody about Texas Red.
Okay.
Good luck with that.
Well, thank you. Thank you so
Sure.
much, Dick, for
Thank you.
everything today. And thank you everyone for listening. Until next time, stay curious and keep leading with purpose.